amid the public health crisis. As you are aware, the central bank and the government have made a concerted policy response focusing on preventing scarring of the economy and its stakeholders. Needless to say, this has resulted in the Central Bank of Sri Lanka being in the spotlight. However, we are pleased to see that the economy has depicted its resilience, having rebounded sharply. With the opening of the country today, by lifting several mobility restrictions, the Sri Lankan economy will begin a new episode of its journey amid the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka is pleased to open its doors to distinguished invitees from all spheres of the economy, most of whom are joining virtually due to the social distancing requirements, whom we believe are working alongside with us to help the economy tide over these turbulent times. Governor Mr. Ajit Nimad Cabral today presents a first-hand account of the future policy direction and actions to be undertaken by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka in tandem with all our stakeholders. This includes immediate steps focused on the stability of the external sector and also those in relation to the critical issues of debt and foreign exchange concerns, financial sector concerns, and macroeconomic stability concerns, all of which threaten economic and price stability and financial system stability, both of which are the core objectives of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. There's a popular proverb, a journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step. Today, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka invites you to take this first step jointly with us. On that note, let me invite Governor Mr. Ajit Nimad Cabral to present the 6-month roadmap for ensuring macroeconomic stability, financial system stability in the country. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Monetary Board members, Deputy Governors, other colleagues at the Central Bank, my dear friends. First of all, I want to say thank you to those of you who have been here physically, a few of you, and all the others who are joining us virtually to share with us this particular moment where we are unfolding the first step, as the Deputy Governor mentioned, in a long journey which we believe is a very important one for our country. We have titled it the 6-month roadmap deliberately because we believe this has to be a concerted effort initially in order to deal with the challenges that we are facing. We would, of course, have the normal roadmap that we would unfold in due course, which would be for the future. But as of now, we are addressing the different tensions that are being felt in our economy so that those of you who have sought clarity and certainty would be provided with that today, hopefully. We all know that Sri Lanka was once graciously referred to as the wonder of Asia. It still is, in my view. And we also expect miracles from our country. And I still believe it is possible to believe in miracles and to go forward. And I believe that is what we are hoping to instill in ourselves, a discipline where we can really reach out to that future that we are preparing for ourselves. So in my first half, I will let you into the background of what we are going into today, the tensions that we feel. I won't go into the details of why it has been caused, but I will look at as-is situation. And going forward, in the next maybe 40 minutes or so, we would deal with how we are going to do it and where we are hoping to go. So that will be the general outline of what we are going to do. So you can sit back and relax and then get ready to go through that journey. We all know that there is a fear about the current economic challenges. And there is reason to believe as well that there could be tensions. And I think that's part of this entire understanding of the situation. There has been sluggish growth COVID pandemic, increase in non-performing loans, increase in central bank's treasury bill holdings, the reduction in the reserves, increase in remittance flows, increase in unauthorized remittance flows, stockpiling of imported goods, hostile international media reports, shortage of foreign currency, sharp depreciation of the rupee, concerns expressed regularly about debt sustainability, weakened revenues, unfavorable sovereign ratings, concerned consumers, SMEs having concerns, deterioration of confidence. All that is, I think, a reflection of the underlying situation in the country. Not only for us, I think it's there for all over lots of countries in the world. The last time we checked, we found that because of the COVID pandemic and other resultant issues, about 123 countries had been downgraded. So we are all going through a journey which is difficult. In addition, of course, we do hear doomsday reports. Quite a number of them are seen regularly. I also happen to read those carefully to see whether there is any merit in those. Sometimes there are some useful parts in those, sometimes not. But that's the world that we are living in, and everyone gets across their message in some way or the other. There is enough opportunities to do that. So I think that's another part of the equation as we go along. Let's have a quick look at the situation, where we were a few years ago and where we are now. Let's look at 2014, where our economy was in the region of about nearly $80 billion. Now, also we are in the same range. I did have some interesting comments at the time that I first went into the monetary board 2 weeks ago. And then it was like coming home to a time that has not changed. The GDP especially was about 80 billion when I left. And when I came back also it was around the same number. So obviously it was a little discomforting, but at the same time comforting, because it was as if there has been no change at all. But that's part of the whole equation. Not only for us, I think it has been for the whole world. There has been a general reduction, which means now we got to work hard at that. We found that the GDP per capita has also come down a little bit. Merchandise exports are pretty much at similar levels as 2014, and so as so many other macro fundamentals also remained at reasonably constant levels, although a few have deteriorated as well. The weakened economy, along with the effect of COVID-19, has caused anxiety, as we all know, and that's the new challenge that we are now facing. The economy grew by 8% in the first half, which was commendable. Had we not been able to record that kind of a growth, it would have been that we are officially in recession. So fortunately we didn't have to do that. Although on a low base, Sri Lanka did have an improvement in its growth. And we found that even the sectors concerned have also been gradually improving, which gives us some comfort that there is an underlying situation within the entire economy that gives us hope that we can move forward with a lot more confidence. The external sector in particular has had some serious challenges, and there has been, more than the challenge itself, the regular commentary that suggests that the challenge is insurmountable. A lot of times I hear comments that we should approach different agencies, but if you just look at the situation from 2019 end onwards, Sri Lanka had reserves of 7.6 billion at the end of 2019. Thereafter, notwithstanding what a lot of people have been saying, we have paid back 6 billion in the year 2020. Then we paid back a further 5.6 billion in 2021 so far. And we are now with a reserve of around 5 billion, which is consisting of 3.5 billion in cash and a swap arrangement that we have for another 1.5 billion. So technically that shouldn't have been possible if you're only looking at the reserve and doing our calculations to say, look, we are unable to pay. Now that's lots of times what happens. People look at the reserve, then they do a little arithmetic, forget that there are inflows that are due to come, and then they come to the conclusion that here is a country that is going to have trouble. So they extend it to 2029, and they will say that there is an amount of $29 billion due, and how are these people going to pay when they have only $5 billion? In that case, that situation would have been a lot worse today. So what it tells us is that you got to understand reserve management is not only dealing with the reserves that we have, but dealing with the inflows as well. Making sure that inflows come in at the right time. None of the companies that you're talking about as being gilt-edged companies would be in a position to pay back all their loans in one shot. That's why you have balance sheets which has current liabilities, current assets, long-term liabilities. So those are all balanced in such a way that we can move forward. So I can assure you that this criticism that sometimes arises, that Sri Lanka will face difficulties, is misplaced, because we have already shown in the last 2 years that it can be done, and you can be sure that even in the next few years it will be done in the same way. The budget deficit has of course increased. There has been a reason for that. The pandemic itself has absorbed nearly 200 billion rupees of additional expenditure which the government had to meet, and if not for that fact we would have been not having this situation today. So that kind of expenditure has to be provided for, and with all that we have still been able to maintain inflation at broad comfortable levels, although there has been some tension there as well, and the amount of money supply has also had to be increased for good measure. Again, that has happened in so many other countries as well. Many countries have responded to the pandemic with that kind of a reaction, which is important. We have also seen, when quantified, that the support that has been given by the government to deal with the pandemic, as well as the central bank to deal with the pandemic, has been very, very impressive. A lot of people have not appreciated that, and sometimes the few months that I was in Parliament, I realized that that had not been sufficiently explained as to what kind of a support has already been given. And I believe it's necessary for us to appreciate that there has been a huge amount of work that has been done as well. The COVID Saubhagya scheme that has been provided by the central bank at very low interest rates in order to support the industries as well as the SMEs as well as businesses has been a very large 165 billion rupees. That's about 1.1% of GDP. The support to the government has been around 2,002 billion rupees. The savings of the private sector as a result of the reduced interest amounts to 365 billion. So sometimes when you see very impressive bottom lines being shown by some companies, although there would have been a lot of work done by those companies themselves, a part of it has been provided by my predecessor, Professor Lakshman, who has been the man who had made the interest rates low enough for those profits to be made. So I believe that's another important recognition that we should sometimes appreciate as well. At the same time, the government has also benefited with the low interest regime that was maintained, 313 billion. Now I'm saying that to make it known that the low interest regime is a very important factor if we are to make our businesses a lot more viable than what we have today. So sometimes in times of stress, it may not be possible to keep it at those levels. That is why all need to cooperate so that we can maintain it at those levels, at reasonable levels, so that both lenders and borrowers could benefit by a situation of that nature. The monetary policy easing measures have been also very helpful. The extended debt moratoria, which the government as well as the central bank put together, was an important factor in order to ensure that businesses survived these difficult times. And of course, we have all seen the proactive vaccination measures the fiscal stimuli that was being given by the government, the tax exemptions, a lot of other areas where a lot of work can be done in order to provide the system with a certain degree of stability. The vaccination program is over here, and I think we have a very good outcome that has happened there. And what does it take? Where does it take to us now? I believe we got to appreciate again that we have faced tough challenges in the past. Of course, we can begin with 1505 to 1948, 443 years of foreign domination. And we came up, notwithstanding what some people might say, we had just one university in 1948. So after 443 years of foreign domination, we had one university. All those countries that dominated us had a lot more universities than that. We today have 17 state universities and about 46 universities of the private sector. So we have come a long way. Only 1% of the people had electricity and water in 1948. Today, nearly 99.9% of the people have electricity, 43% of people have water on tap, and in the next 4 to 5 years, we would ensure that about 85% of the people would have water on tap. So those are the factors that we have been able to generate in the last 73 years. We have gone through a 3-decade conflict, 2 insurrections, power and energy crisis, droughts, pandemics, tsunamis, double-digit inflation, depletion of foreign reserves in the past, so many different types of struggles that we have had, but we have come out on top always. So what are we hoping to do today? We are trying to see how we are going to give clarity to the economy. And clarity doesn't come with one intervention alone. It has to come from several interventions, and the burden should be shared by all stakeholders. If it is just one stakeholder who is putting their hand up and going to be the one who would deal with the situation, I don't think it would work. It has to be a shared approach. It's like all of us are going in a boat in stormy seas. We all have to go in a certain disciplined manner. We have to move forward without rocking the boat, especially in times of turbulence. If we don't do that, and we don't have a journey which is methodical and which is done in a proper manner, it is likely that the boat would capsize. So if you want to keep the boat heading in the right direction and moving in the right direction, we got to all understand what the role of each stakeholder should be, and we should accordingly move forward. So I've just put down, we have worked out the different sectors: government, banking sector, people, central bank, importers, exporters, capital and debt markets, sovereign rating agencies, exchange houses, service exporters, investors, development partners. All of them will need to move together in a cohesive pattern. The central bank is the agency that has been entrusted with the responsibility of delivering economic and price stability as well as financial system stability. It sounds simple, but the reason why the society has provided that entire responsibility to an institution is because they know it is important for that institution to deliver that for the country. It is only when you don't have stability that you realize what stability is. If you don't have stability of the foreign exchange rate at which the rupee trades, then you realize that it is not easy for you to do your businesses. If you do not know what the next year is going to bring, then your business will also be affected. So you need a comfort that there is a stable environment, and that is what the central bank is expected to do by law, and that is why the central bank intends to do, because that is our duty and responsibility by the country, by the people of this country, to deliver that stability. So today's plan that is unfolded would be addressing that very important factor, that we are providing the stability for the markets as well as to everyone. So our plan would be, in overall plan, although we are only focusing on the number one, will be a 6-month plan, which is what we are going to do today, and then a 1-year horizon, and then a medium to long-term plan. The first 6 months is immediate stabilization. We want to have stability. The second is consolidation. And the third is building the cushions to be able to absorb any shocks for the future. It's like a 50-over match, and within the first 10 overs, you have lost 4 wickets, not very many runs on the board. Then you got to stabilize. If the number 5 and number 6 batsmen get onto the crease and start hitting out, I don't think the match will be won. So you got to first stabilize, make sure that you have the necessary wickets in hand so that you can approach the rest of the overs with a lot more confidence. Then you consolidate, where you score a few runs so that the target doesn't become too high, and at the same time you are amassing the strength to move into the next phase. The third phase would be a lot more comfortable, but at the same time there will be risks there as well. And then you got to ensure that you have the necessary cushions. So your eye must be in so that you can hit the ball well. And that's part of the strategy of a good cricket team. So if you follow that, I think this match could also be won. The central bank will take immediate steps to ensure stability, and the proper management of this period will result in clarity and certainty. Thereafter, we envisage the foreign exchange direct investments to come. We envisage tourism to improve. We envisage the other factors that have, the building blocks that have been put in place, particularly the pharmaceutical industry, the monetization of certain underutilized assets. All those will kick in a lot more strongly, and then Sri Lanka will be able to move forward with a lot more clarity. So the new efforts will demand moderate contributions from all stakeholders, the government, the central bank, the banking sector, merchandise and service exporters, importers, retailers, and the global Sri Lankans as main stakeholders, but there will be others also who will have to play their part. We know the problem. That's why we went through this long discourse, because sometimes some people believe that we don't know the problem. And they tell us this is the problem. Yes, we also know that there is a problem. But now it is our turn to find the solutions, and that's why some of those problems are significant. There's pressure on the fiscal operations, there's accumulation of external debt, and the debt raised through ISPs has been somewhat large. That could lead us to some vulnerabilities. The pandemic has affected certain huge parts of our economy. Rating downgrades had aggravated the situation. The confidence on the debt servicing, on some basis, because we were able to pay back 2 of the main debts outstanding, $2 billion, without any deferment at all, and we don't intend to do any deferment even in the future, has brought in some confidence. And high yields in the market sometimes can be a little disturbing as well. Sovereign ratings have come down from where we were some time ago, but we are confident that once these are put in place and they see results, then Sri Lanka will be able to go on a trajectory which is on the upward trend. The banking sector has been resilient, but we need to deal with a few issues. That will be something that we are discussing today. The non-banking sector also has seen some difficulties. There has been some finance companies that have failed. Those need to be also addressed, because there are lots of stakeholders that have been affected by that. The implementation of the consolidation program is another area which we need to be addressing our minds. And in the case of exporters, we find that the goods flow has taken place, and that's duly recorded as exports, but the corresponding amounts that need to come in as cash flows have not materialized at the same levels. Now, our research departments have access to all this information, and there's no need or reason for them to make any other reports on these matters. I have seen a few people getting a little excited that they are not hoarding any dollars, but they are actually repatriating and converting. That's what we really want. So if that is being done, there's absolutely no issue, and we are all on the same page. It is only those who have not done that, there is a concern, because that export actually becomes an export only once it is realized in rupees in this country. So there is a need for some instances for exports to have corresponding imports, which we recognize. And from the areas that we are going to talk to you about today, you would see that we have addressed that as well, perfectly in order, and we have to provide for that. But at the same time, we expect the exports to materialize as converted rupees, because that is where the whole exercise is there. So we expect that to happen, and we need to take a few steps to ensure that it happens. In many, many countries that happens. So we have sometimes borrowed technical expertise from those countries to understand how those countries are also dealing with it, and we would be dealing with that today as well. A few pressures have built up in the case of importers and exporters, mainly because of speculative reasons. We all know that when there is uncertainty, people provide for the worst, and that's a human tendency. You expect the worst. So if you expect the worst, if you feel that the rupee is depreciating, you would depreciate it to the worst number that you feel that it will go to. And when you do that, then you will provide for your selling price based on that too. So all those factors kick in, and that's why we have to make sure that that uncertainty is removed as quickly as possible. Service exporters other than tourism have also been affected. Industrialists have faced challenges. Money changers especially have lost their businesses, mainly because there was nothing much for them to encash when there was no tourism. Retailers and wholesalers have also been affected, although the food inflation has been at reasonable levels. I'm not saying at satisfactory levels, but it should be brought down further. Workers' remittances have also been affected in the past few months, particularly because of the fact that there was a dual exchange rate prevailing, and that helped them to go and get it outside the normal course of the banking sector. And also there was a reduction in the number of people who could go abroad, and that was another factor. Stocks and shares, the Securities Exchange would know that in the last few months the stock exchange has been going forward well, but at the same time the foreign holdings of both the government securities as well as equities have been dropping. At the same time, that gives us the feeling as well as the opportunity that it could go up to that level provided we get our factors right. Particularly the government securities. I remember at the end of 2014, we had $3,489 million. We have $9 million now, but that doesn't matter. We have to consider that space, and we are working on that now, and we are confident that that would soon be reversed and there would be a positive flow coming in. So would it be for the equities. The Securities and Exchange Act was passed just a few months ago, which meant that the long-felt need of new legislation has also occurred, and we are on the right track there. The central bank has also faced a few challenges, depletion of foreign reserves and the pressure, but we believe that those also could be addressed with the plan that we are going to put in place. The exchange rate impact on the central government's debt is another factor that we must all be conscious of, because the rupee depreciation can be a huge burden if you do have the debt in US dollars as well. If you have foreign debt, any depreciation of the currency could affect the total composition of the debt, and that is something that we must all be concerned about, and that is why the central bank takes the necessary steps to ensure that we bring stability. The people have faced challenges too, although several government policies have been helpful. The GDP loss has been addressed now, it's being addressed, and the allocations by government, about 200 and more than 200 billion rupees has also been stated, and the lockdown has definitely affected us as a whole. So now we are hoping to suggest to you or to tell you what the to-do list is. It's going to be a simple to-do list that each one will have to do, and that will help Sri Lanka to reset its course. Not too much, but a fairly clear reset, which will help us to go through the next 6 months without any undue additional worry or pain. So, අපි ඒකට කියනවා කළ යුතු දේ ලයිස්තුවක් හැටියට අපිට මේ අවස්ථාවේදී මේ දැන් තියෙන අභියෝග වලින් අපිට ඉදිරියට යන්නට නම් අපිට පැහැදිලි දර්ශනයක් අවශ්‍යයි, පැහැදිලි වැඩපිළිවෙලක් අවශ්‍යයි. ඒ වැඩපිළිවෙල අපේ රටේ ඉදිරි ගමනට සියලුම පාර්ශ්වකරුවන්ට බොහෝම පැහැදිලිව දඩුම් දෙන්නට පුළුවන් නම් අපිට එකතු වෙලා ඒ තිබෙන අභියෝගයට මුහුණ දෙන්නට පුළුවන් වෙන බව අපිට කියන්න පුළුවන්. ඉතින් මහා බැංකුවෙන් අපි යෝජනා කරන්නේ එවැනි කටයුත්තක් සියලු දෙනාම කළ යුතු දේවල් පිළිබඳව අපි ඒක ඉදිරිපත් කිරීමෙන් පසුව විවිධ පාර්ශ්වයන් වලට බොහොම පැහැදිලිව Taman කළ යුතු දේවල් ගැන හොඳ අදහසක් සහ අවබෝධයක් ලැබෙනවා. එතකොට අපිට එකමුතුව මේ කටයුත්තට පිවිසෙන්න පුළුවන් කියන එක තමයි අපේ අදහස. මේ පිවිසීම සඳහා රජය, මහා බැංකුව, බැංකු ක්ෂේත්‍රය, අපනයනකරුවන්, ආනයනකරුවන්, විවිධ පෞද්ගලික ක්ෂේත්‍රයේ සිටින අය, පිටරටවල් වලින් ඉඳලා ලංකාවට මුදල් එවන අය, කොටස් වෙළඳපොළ, අනිකුත් සියලුම පාර්ශ්වයන් එකතු වෙලා කළ යුතු දේවල් පිළිබඳව තමයි මේ සැලැස්ම ඉදිරිපත් වෙන්නේ. So the critical issues that we have will concern the debt and forex concerns. I think that is where a lot of people have certain concerns, and we need to address that. The financial sector concerns, the macroeconomic stability concerns. මම ඒව ගැන කියනවා නම් තීරණාත්මක සාධක කීපයක් තියෙනවා. මේ අවස්ථාවේදී අපිට අපේ කටයුතු ඉදිරිපත් කරන්නට. එකක් තමයි ණය සහ විදේශ විනිමය පිළිබඳව අපි කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ මොනවද කියලා. ඒත් එක්කම මූල්‍ය අංශය අපිට ඉදිරියට ගෙනියන්නට නම් අපි කළ යුතු දේවල් මොනවද ඊළඟ මාස 6 තුළදී. ඒත් එක්කම සාර්ව ආර්ථික ස්ථායීභාවය රැකගෙන ඉදිරියට යන ගමනට අවශ්‍ය වන සාධක මොනවද කියලාත් අපි මෙතනදී කියන්නට බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. We'll first deal with the debt and forex concerns. What should the government do? Now here I want to also mention that very often we in Sri Lanka we practice what I call